Well, we have a very special guest joining us on the telephone this morning, and he's actually, I used to have a boss that said, "Don't even why do you have to say telephone?" Well, you can tell the difference if you're listening, right? That's obvious. It's 9:07, 64. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. That means you can listen to us online anywhere around the world by just clicking on that Listen Live icon. Probably, I think it's going to be the biggest event of the summer in the Twin Falls, Idaho area. The next, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, because we have a fellow coming here from Washington State who has made quite a name for himself politically as well as in faith, in Christian faith, and that is because he's a pastor of a large church there as well. He's a native of Iran, moved here with his family, came to the West way back in 1979 after the fall of the Shah's government and the takeover by the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic Republic. We're joined this morning. We'd like to say a big welcome to Pastor Shahram Hadian. And first of all, welcome to our program.
Bill, thank you for having me. It's an absolute blessing.
You're coming here next week, and you're doing a number of events. One of the topics of your discussion is something you call Chrislam. Am I pronouncing that right?
It's actually Chrislam, and it's a word that has been created. Of course, I didn't create it, but it's a word that's been created really kind of within the interfaith community. A lot of people don't use that particular term, but the idea basically is a blending. And so when you see this kind of ecumenicalism or blending, where the notion of, it's all one God. We all believe in the same God. It's the same word. There's a lot of confusion there. So what this presentation on Monday night in Flyer, in Idaho, is meant to expose this false ecumenicalism, this false idea that there is a common God. I came out of Islam. I was a Muslim. I can tell you that Allah, the God of Islam, is not the same God as the God of the Bible. But there's much confusion in our nation, and particularly, Bill, unfortunately, within the Christian community on this issue. There are still many advocating out there that Islam is an Abrahamic faith, which is incorrect. It is not an Abrahamic faith. Arabs are descendants of Ishmael, but not all Muslims are Arabs, and so there's much confusion. But we're going to seek to really hit this hard and expose the fallacy of a common God or a common word, and hopefully be able to equip the community and people of God of how to really engage Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ, as somebody did with me, and God rescued me out of the darkness of Islam and into the light of His kingdom.
We should point out that appearance 7 p.m. on Monday night at Canyon View Baptist Church in Filer, and again, public is welcome. We should point that out because this is something that you really want people to hear.
Absolutely, it's a free event. Public are welcome. We're going to be making this presentation to anybody who wants to come and listen, and hopefully has an open mind. As I said, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in our society is this sort of multiculturalism, interfaith, ecumenical dialogue. And as a Christian, it sounds good, but really it's leading us down a path that is causing great confusion within not just the church, but even how we're dealing with the issue of Islam, because many of these churches, Bill, will not truly teach what Islam is, which is what Tuesday night's presentation is about at Eastside Baptist Church in Twin Falls. Tuesday night I'm going to be talking about what the real ideology of Islam is. We're going to peel the layers back, and we're going to unveil that, and that's why oftentimes I get a lot of negative attention from the media or for some of the folks out there who want to buy into that sort of false multiculturalism, because they don't really want to look at what Islam is, and I believe people are beginning to see it more now on the world stage of what the true Islam is that it has been since the beginning of Islam.
Our guest is Pastor Shahram Hadian, and he's joining us this morning, and he's doing a couple of public events next week in the area, Monday and Tuesday nights, and he's going to be talking to the general public about things that they really should know. When you mentioned that there are critics out there, obviously there are people already online making noise about you being here. They're not happy about you being here. I'm sure that we were on the air a few weeks ago talking with Brigitte Gabriel, and she mentions that there are people who are constantly threatening her life. Who is it? Ayan Hirsi Ali gets the same response from people when she speaks about Islam, and if they denigrate you at one point, but at least those threats tell you, and the criticism of you tell you that you must be striking a nerve at some point.
Absolutely. In fact, the last time I was in Idaho back in March, I was speaking to some of the legislature in Boise and some groups there. We got a tremendous amount of negative backlash, particularly from the media and, again, the interfaith community and some of the Islamic groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations, who is a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood. And, so you're absolutely right. It is striking a chord. I believe that it is exposing Islam's agenda and the agenda of these Islamists in America. And by the way, Bill, this is something that recently we decided that we're going to be more vocal about. When you hear the media or liberals out there, whoever, that will use this term Islamophobia, you've probably heard that term many times, right? I want to be very clear that when a Muslim makes a charge under Islamic law of being an Islamophobe, it is actually bringing forth a charge of slander. What they're really saying is you're slandering Islam. Well, under Islamic law, slander carries with it ultimately a death sentence. If you are convicted in an Islamic country of slandering Islam or slandering the Prophet, it's a death sentence. And so I just want to be very clear that when they make that charge, they're really throwing a death sentence or actually a death threat at you. It's when it's coming from an Islamic group. And so when I hear critics or the media run to CARE and contact CARE about myself or Brigitte or Walid Shubat or anybody else that's out there trying to expose the real face of Islam, and then they throw that charge of Islamophobia, they're really bringing a death threat. That's what it really is. And that's what we got to begin to communicate, because isn't it amazing that this notion that we've been just spoon-fed of a peaceful Islam, and yet we see people who have to travel around this country like myself oftentimes have much security because of threats for our lives. And of course, for me personally, my situation is a little different than Brigitte's because I'm a former Muslim. Brigitte was raised as a Christian. I'm a former Muslim, so I'm an apostate. I'm one who's left the faith, and according to the very clear teachings, I deserve the death penalty.
When we talk a little bit about this clash of cultures, obviously the biggest story since I've arrived in Twin Falls at the end of last year, coming into this year, is the resettlement plan with the Syrian members of the Syrian Muslim community, and we feel in many cases we're really being sold a bill of goods about this, that these people are going to come here. Some of them obviously probably come and just want to open up a shop, get into business, and actually live the American dream. I'm not going to discount that, but I think the fear is we don't really know. There's not really much of a sorting process going on here. Do you think that we have a legitimate fear?
It is an absolute, can I maybe use a different term? It is an absolute legitimate concern, because when we turn to use fear, the other side throws in and says, oh, you're just fear-mongering. You know what I'm saying? So I want to use the term concern, valid concern. And Bill, it's not just coming from you or me. It is coming from members of law enforcement. I want to remind your listeners that twice in the last 6 months, going back to February and then in June, first it was a deputy director of the FBI, then it was a director of the FBI himself testifying before Congress that there is no vetting process in place, particularly for the Syrian refugees, because Syria is in a civil war, well, what we call a civil war, and places like Iraq, we have Somalia. So you guys are in Twin Falls are potentially not only going to see Syrian refugees, but Somalian refugees, and perhaps from Iraq, perhaps from North Africa. And in many of these places, there is no vetting process. They're the ones who are saying in June, not just the FBI, Homeland Security, and the Joint Counterterrorism Task Force testified to this before Congress, begging Congress, telling them that, look, we're being overwhelmed because of the immigration, because of the refugees, and it is why I publicly said that I believe that there must be an immediate halt to the refugee program, which, Bill, if you talk to your state legislators, most of them have no clue who's coming, where are they coming from, have they been vetted medically, have they been vetted as far as their national security threat. A lot of your local mayors do not know, with the exception of the mayor of Boise, who's opened his arms wide and said, "Oh, we're going to be a multicultural melting pot." He should, by the way, he should go over to Europe for a while. My recommendation to the mayor of Boise, and spend some time in Europe and see how that works for them.
I was going to say that you see some obvious evidence in places like Manchester and Birmingham in England, and it's not pretty.
It's not pretty, and I do a radio show, a weekly radio show on American Family Radio on Islam, and my co-host lived in Great Britain for 20 plus years, and he can tell you firsthand what it was like witnessing his community become Islamicized. But so the refugee situation that we're going to be addressing while we're there. By the way, there is a concept in Islam called al-hijra, and al-hijra means to migrate. So I just want people to understand this is not just our concerns are not just, particularly for Muslims, they're not based on just, oh, we're fearful of foreigners. I get called that too now once in a while, xenophobe. This is legitimately based on Islamic doctrine, because Muslims are commanded not only to migrate, but once they migrate, they are very clearly commanded to not assimilate. They're clearly commanded to segregate, continue to grow in population, in immigration, and then began to demand for Sharia, which, by the way, in Seattle, Washington, I don't know if you've been following the news, Bill, our mayor, the openly homosexual mayor of Seattle that used taxpayer dollars to paint the sidewalks with the rainbow flag, he's now wanting to open the door for Muslims to be able to have Sharia-compliant financing in Seattle, where we're going to give them special loan products where they don't have to pay interest rates, whereas you and I, who own a house, we have to pay an interest rate. So this is the type of, I don't know if you can call it lunacy or if you call it just, I don't know what it is. This really is incredible what we're seeing in the face of bending over backwards to Islam. So the concept of immigration and migration is a specific doctrine of jihad. I want to be very clear about that. It is a specific doctrine of jihad where they target specific areas that they deem as vital to their overall mission, and they come intentionally. And our government, from the United Nations and the White House and the State Department, is helping them in that process. 92% of the Syrian refugees that are coming into the United States, according to the State Department, are Muslim.
Pastor, I've got to let you go on that note. I've got a hard break coming up, but I do very much look forward to meeting you next week.
Look forward to it, Bill. Thank you for your time.
And God bless you, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Pastor Shahram Hadian joining us, or Hadian, as it's pronounced now in the United States. Rolls off the English tongue a little bit better, joining us this morning. We'll get your reaction to his comments in just a few minutes. It's 9:20 and 65. Pastor Shahram Hadian joining us in the last segment of the program, and here's a thought. At least I want to pass this along. He has a busy schedule, so we couldn't keep him for the full half hour. But I will point out, if you heard something there and you thought, I'd like to hear more, you have a couple of opportunities next week. He's actually got 4 appearances in the Twin Falls area. 2 of them are open to the public. One of the closed sessions, and they have to do this in a rather quiet area, and they're not releasing details on what's taking place. He's doing a presentation for law enforcers as well as for community leaders, and they're doing that quietly. And then they're also they're meeting with some other local pastors, just really for, I think, Christian fellowship and a discussion about some things we should be concerned about. That is also a closed meeting. But the 2 public events, and if you're worried about safety, there will be a strong law enforcement presence at both of these public events. Monday night, 7 p.m. in Filer at Canyon View Baptist Church. And he's going to be talking about Islam. And he's going to be explaining, and of course, for all of his critics who jump up and down and scream about this man, he grew up in an Islamic family in Iran before converting to Christianity. Do you think he might have a better understanding of Islam than some American liberal who's yammering away and pounding away at a keyboard on a blog in his mother's basement? Do you think that perhaps he might actually have a better understanding? Because I would say he does. He lived it. He was there. He knows exactly what's going on. And if we're supposed to discount everything he says, why does he always need to speak when he goes out in public? Why does he need to speak with a security detail? Doesn't that tell you all you need to know? Number two, he's got another event coming up on Tuesday night. This will be 7 o'clock again. This takes place in Twin Falls at Eastside Baptist Church on Eastland. And this is the true face of Islam. So these are two different distinct messages. But he'll be presenting both of those. 9:25, Bill Colley with you, 65 at our studios. So what's your take on this? Why does this man have to travel with security if he is supposedly wrong? You know, he pointed out that the mayor of Boise is all on board with this. Oh, isn't this wonderful? My multicultural city, Mayor Biter. You realize if he was a mayor in a German city, he'd be what, the Meisterbiter? Quite appropriate, isn't it? You could reach our program today by calling 736-0300, 736-0300. Caller earlier today referenced this situation and said, when is it going to come up before, other than just the Board of Trustees at the College of Southern Idaho, how about taking it to some of the local governments? And I have a question here that was emailed my way this morning. City of Twin Falls, somebody asked, do they have the power to revoke the Refugee Center's business license or registration? Now, there's a question, and so this move is now going to, this movement is going to be going on away from College of Southern Idaho. Well, not away from it, but they're going to expand it, and they're going to start making their questions and their concerns known in front of the Twin Falls City Council. Fair warning for you counselors out there, you're going to be asked about this. Maybe here on this program next time you come by. But you're going to be questioned about it because I realize people say, and I for a long time I would agree with this. This whole refugee center it's a UN run federal program, and once a community agrees to it, you to some degree you're stuck with it. I mentioned yesterday the governor of Wyoming decided to opt out when he was approached by the organization involved with it. He polled the public. He got an answer. The public didn't want it in Wyoming, and he said no. I think in Idaho, you'd have to go back to probably what? Cecil Andrus was responsible for bringing this program to Idaho. Once it's here, can we then remove it, or are we stuck with it? So that's a question, I think, at the city level. It's a question at the county level. It's a question at the state level that we've all got to start considering now. And so this is the next front for the people who are involved in this, is taking this to some of their other governments and saying, hey, wait a second. This is popular majority, right? This is how we run our governments. And you're public servants. Your public office is not your private property. So therefore, as our servants, we want some answers. Whether you like it or not, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, we want some answers. So I think that is true. That's the next step in all of this. And if you get an opportunity on Monday or Tuesday nights, please feel free to drop by one of these churches where you can hear Pastor Hadian speaking, because once more, all of the critics and all of those folks in media who are stamping their feet and jumping up and down, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? What part of a free and open discussion and hearing other points of view? There's an editorial, according to a caller this morning in one of our local rags, screaming about how opposition to this whole refugee resettlement program is just mean-spirited, wrong, and they know better, of course, because once they actually went to work at a newspaper, their IQ grew by 20%. Their heads got really, really big. They've been big-headed for a long time over there. But the fact of the matter is, what is wrong with hearing another point of view? Why do you wish to denigrate that or silence it? If you're in the media business and you claim that you're journalists, then I think that you'd be interested in hearing this and presenting this view to everyone as well. Before you open up your big fat mouths over there at the Times News, maybe you ought to go hear this guy speak. Maybe you'll learn something. 9:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 65. One more half hour of our program coming up. Oh, speaking of people with big mouths, Nancy Pelosi coming out in defense of Planned Parenthood. I wonder when she's finally going to get excommunicated. More details on that coming up.